You know, everybody should have those like answer sheets. Not that they give you the answer, but they allow you to write the answers down. We're going to do some exercises. I'm going to talk a little bit about them first so we know what it is we're doing and why we're doing it and what's important and what's not. And then we're going to have 2 diagnosing and healing exercises where I'm going to give you some tools that you can use your mind to heal. And then we're going to do a couple of remote viewing exercises, 3 of them actually. Okay, what do we hope to accomplish? Now, many of you have already been using your focus intent to do things. Here's where I'll probably step on some of your ways that you do things, some of your beliefs. We're going to learn to focus our intent effectively without the usual process of ritual. Okay, now ritual is very important to many people. We use tools to focus our intent. The tools can be rituals, they can be objects, they can be processes, and these are tools that help us focus our intent. Remember, the only active ingredient here is the intent of consciousness. Okay, nothing else is really an active ingredient. The rest of it is tools. How do we help ourselves do that? Okay, now often we're going to go in some altered state, and that altered state requires some ritual, right? First we have to sit down, then we go through this relaxation exercise, and it has to be quiet, and then we have to close our eyes, or we have to be lying down, or we have to be sitting up, some sort of thing like that. And you know, we have certain ways that we physically rest our body. You know, maybe our hands are this way, you know, maybe we're sitting in lotus position. We have all these rituals that we go through, and that's part of our meditation process. They're just rituals, and they're tools, and they're basically unnecessary. Your intent is just your consciousness. Now, when I say they're unnecessary, it doesn't mean that they aren't good and you shouldn't use them. It's just that there's no theoretical reason why you have to use them. Okay, they're just part of your tool set. Tools are good. We need tools because we're not clever enough to do things without them. See, so we need tools. So we're not going to use any tools. We're not going to use any rituals. We're not going to do any, all right, before we do this, let's take, time to do this and relax. We're not going to do any of that, because what I want you to learn is that it may surprise you that you can be in that altered state where your intent is focused and effective, and it takes you less than 10 seconds to get there, and takes you no more than that to come back. It's just instantaneous. What you need to learn is the same without a body. It's the same with all of these things. You need to learn it's just your intent and focusing your intent. And I purposely am going to move very fast through these things, because if I give you time to think about it, you'll muddle it up. You will start to process. You'll start to judge. You'll start to work on things with your intellect, and that'll just muddy the waters and make it difficult for you. It'll frustrate you. So I'm going to move it right along. I'm not going to give you a lot of time to think about it. We're going to go from the one thing to the next to give you a little bit of time to do it. We just move on, and we'll just do it, okay? We're going to learn how to parallel process and multitask. You can do more than one thing at once. You can be in more than one reality at once. I'm going to have you be in 2 realities at the same time. I'm going to have you be in this reality. You're going to be here because you're going to be listening to my voice, and you're going to be following the directions. You're going to be someplace else where you're going to be sending energy, or you're going to be changing things. You're going to be remote viewing, and that's done from a non-physical stance. So you're going to be switching your data stream. You're going to be going out and grabbing data out of that past database. Okay? Sometimes out of that future database, you're going to be grabbing data, and at the same time, you're going to be here, and you're going to be listening to me, and you're going to parallel process these 2 realities at once. Now, this all sounds like, yeah, that's really hard. It's a big deal. You'll see it's not a big deal. That's part of the things I want you to learn. It's just your intention. It's just changing your focus. That's not so hard. Okay, we're going to switch states quickly, effortlessly. You're going to be there, here, back there again, both at the same time, and it will be effortless. We're going to use intent to define a unique address. You can define a unique address by relationship, a unique event, person, place, situation. So when I say that we're going to work on, I could say we're going to work on Mr. X. Well, who's Mr. X? Now, some people, when they heal, they need to touch, or they need a photograph, or they need a lock of hair, or, a dirty sock, something that connects them to that person. All that's unnecessary. Those are tools. And we're going to learn to do without the tools. Distance is not necessary. You can as easily heal or work or communicate with somebody on the other side of the planet or on a different planet as easily as you can somebody that you're touching. It's right next to you. Distance in the world of consciousness, distance doesn't exist. There is no distance. Okay? We're going to learn that it's not body-centered. The body is irrelevant to the process. It's all consciousness-centered in your consciousness. All right, now, you have to have a unique positive identification. So if I say we're going to heal Mr. X, then how do you identify that person? It's the Mr. X that I'm telling you about to heal. That's the one, because there's only one Mr. X that I'm telling you to heal. That's a unique address. It's a unique address through my thought. So basically, you work through my connection to Mr. X. I know who Mr. X is, and I have it written down what his problem is and so on. So as long as I know, you don't have to know. All you say is, I want to go to that person he's talking about. You're there. You see, you don't have to really have any other ID. But that is a unique ID because I'm only thinking about or talking about or inferring to one unique individual when I say that. So when I say one of the tools we're going to use, I'm going to give you a bunch of tools to use, and they're all just tools. Nothing sacred about them. They're just tools to help you focus. One of the tools I'm going to give you about it, I'm going to say, imagine a humanoid shape. Okay, now when I say imagine humanoid shape, I'm thinking about sort of like a gingerbread cookie. That's a humanoid shape. Don't try to make this into some 3D high-res, picture of a human being with pores on their skin and little hairs and all the rest of it. That will drive you nuts. It takes too much energy and it's not necessary. The humanoid shape is a metaphor. It's a way to help you focus your intent. That's all. Okay. We are going to look either today or tomorrow. We're going to look at things like auras in some cases. And when we do that, it's not like, well, I don't know if I'm seeing the real aura. I see something, but maybe that's just my imagination. That's not the real aura. There is no real aura. The aura is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for a process of collecting data. Now, yes, there is a real aura in the sense that there's a real process. You get real data, and that real data comes out in some output format, and an aura, picture's worth 1,000 words, is a good way to do it. And yes, I've seen auras for, 35, 40 years. It's real easy. You can see different kinds, and they tell you different information. And yes, they're there, and yes, they're very real, and yes, you see them, but that's just in your mind's eye. That's just data. And the output format is whatever you want it to be. So when I say make a humanoid shape, like a gingerbread cookie, that's it, just a humanoid shape. Now, some people are not good at visualizing, and some people are terrific at it. It usually divides between male and female. Males have a much easier time visualizing things. Some females are good at it, but most males just naturally don't have any trouble seeing a picture of whatever. Okay, most ladies visualize in a little different way, and it's odd, but it's hard to describe. But you'll talk to a lady, and she'll say, what I saw was, and she describes this intricate picture, and then she'll say, but I don't see pictures. I don't visualize. Well, what was it that you just described to me? She says, well, I don't know. I knew that's just the way it was. I just felt that way. Well, that's just as good if it just feels that way. Just however you connect to it. So don't stress over getting a picture. Connect to it however way you connect to it best. Just make the connection to it. And let this has to be a zero stress exercise. Any kind of stress, any kind of pushing, any kind of making it be the way you think it ought to be will damage the results. You can't do that. When I talk about this humanoid shape, remember I said you could query the database, but if you don't query it specifically, you'll get a non-specific answer. So when I say that I'm going to tell you later, let's say somebody has something, wrong with their heart, and you're supposed to diagnose that. Well, heart's not in the center of the body. Heart's off to one side. So when I say, look at this figure, and you say, okay, I'm looking at a figure. Well, did your intent specify whether you're looking at it from the front or the back? Well, it'll make a difference on which side you find that heart on, won't it? Or you'll say, oh, there was a problem with their left arm. Well, maybe that's the right arm because you didn't specify which way you were looking at it, you see. So these are the kinds of things, when you use your intent, you have to be specific about exactly what you want and how you want it displayed. So when you say, all right, I'm looking at the front of the person, I want their toes and nose to face me, then that's the way you'll get the data. If you say the other way, you'll get the data on the other side. You see, you get to specify the output. So tools, lots of tools. I'm going to give you a bunch of tools you can use. Don't feel like you're obligated to use my tools after today. Well, I'd like you to use them today because this is the exercise. We're doing my tools today. But use your own tools. In general, once you get the idea, once you practice at this enough that you get to where you kind of get the sense of what you're doing and it's working for you, then create your own tools. Don't work with just the tools that I give you. Make tools that suit you. Tools are personal. One person's tool is somebody else's block. So you just make your own tools. They're just metaphors. You can manipulate time. All the data's there, and it's data in time. If you'd like to see forward in time, just intend that your data is forward in time and have some way that you can output that. You can have graph of health versus time if you want to do a diagnosis, you want to see a prognosis, what's the probability? Then you can put a scale on that time. You can say, I want to see over the next 2 weeks, or I want to see over the next 5 years. You look at the graph, it'll be output just the way you intend it. All right? Now, you can manipulate time by going forward and backward. We'll do some of that. We're going to do two different things. We're going to diagnose. In other words, I'm going to let you look at an individual, and then you're going to see what's wrong with them, and then you're going to write down on that little paper. You're going to make marks on that paper of what you found. And we're going to do some remote viewing. And let's see. All right, well, let's get started. That's enough talk. We'll have a little more talk later when we get to the approach. But just to warm up, I'm going to give you some warm-ups here. And this is not ritual. There's a method for my madness, but let's just, humor me. Let's do this warm-ups. So you can close your eyes. You can open your eyes. You can do it however it is you like. But I just want you to imagine some things. We're just using our imagination here. Okay. Everybody just imagine that you're riding a bicycle. Now I want you to imagine it from two perspectives. You're on the bicycle riding it, and you're off the bicycle watching yourself ride it. Okay, now I want you to imagine that you're riding an elephant. Now, when you imagine you're riding an elephant, I want you to hear it, I want you to smell it, I want you to feel it, as well as see it. You're riding an elephant. Again, two perspectives, on and off. Okay, now visit a sunflower. Zoom in on the seeds at the center. See that big sunflower? Zoom up close. Zoom right up to the seeds at the center. Now slip inside a seed and look at the parts and structure inside the seed. Okay, next, imagine that you're doing laundry. Hear the slush of the water, smell the soap and the chemicals. Hear it. Imagine you're doing laundry. All of your senses are engaged. Next, imagine that you're at a beach. Feel the warmth, the sounds, the smell, the salt, the sand. Lie down on the sand. Feel the sand. Feel the sun. Now I want you to imagine a gingerbread man cookie. I want this gingerbread man to have a happy face and buttons. Now I want him to be a brown cookie with black buttons. Now a vanilla white cookie with brown buttons. Now zoom right up close to the surface and notice the texture in detail. Next, I want you to imagine an image of Santa Claus. Then imagine and sense and feel the holiday spirit of Christmas and New Year's Eve. Okay, that's enough of the warm-ups. Now, how did you imagine all these things? You imagined them with metaphors and symbols. And those metaphors and symbols were restricted to what came out of your experience. Now, you may have never experienced riding an elephant, but you've probably seen elephants, and you've probably seen someone riding them, and you probably have some idea of what that is. But you're limited, right, by your own, what's inside of you, your own experience limits this. It's all specific to you. Your symbols will be different. What you imagined and saw is very different from what everybody else imagined and saw. You see, we're all interpreting the data differently. Okay? So, is what you see in the non-physical your imagination, or is that real? Now, see, that's going to be a big question for you. Well, you know, imagination means that you supply the data to the data stream, right? You create the data yourself. If it's outside of you, then something else is generating that data. The data comes from outside of you. Data's data. You just get the data. However, wherever the source comes from, that's beside the point. You react to the data in the same way. So how can you tell the difference? This is a thing that a lot of people worry about, obsess over. This is one of the biggest stumbling blocks you'll have in out of body or doing healing or anything else. You always want to judge it. Was that real, or am I just making that up? Let that go. Okay, let that go. Stop with the judging. I know at the Monroe Institute, they have this thing they call clicking out, where people will go into their exercises, and then just at the time when something's supposed to happen, they lose consciousness. They're gone. It's called they clicked out. Well, a lot of those people are left-brainers, technical people, logical structure people. And the reason they click out is because they're suddenly in an untenable situation. They're being led to this experience, and they don't know whether it's real or not. They don't know whether it's outside of them or it's their imagination. And because they can't tell, they're in an untenable position. They can't go along through it if it's their imagination because they only want a real experience. So they click out, lose consciousness. This is a very big stressor. So you need to just get over that and let it go. Now, it is important that you determine the difference between whether you're making it up or whether it's outside of you. And we'll talk about that later, how you do that. What's the process, the structure of differentiating between the two. But for now, let's just forget about it. Don't worry about it. No judgments. Let it be whatever it is. Don't second guess it. Don't think, am I doing this right? Is I seeing the right thing? Is this the right data, or am I making this up? Let all that go. That's your ego and your intellect ruining your experience as a being, getting in your way. Okay, so that will be important. Now, does it matter for healing whether or not what you get is your imagination or not? No. Because you're not getting. Healing is a giving. You're sending stuff. So if you're sending stuff to an imagined humanoid image, that's fine. Your humanoid image is just a metaphor. You don't say, is that the real image? Am I really looking at the health energy body, or am I just making that? It doesn't make any difference. It makes no difference whatsoever. Because you're sending energy. You're the source. Okay? All you need is a tool, a metaphor to help you focus that intent. But what on the other hand, what about the diagnosis? Does it make a difference on the diagnosis whether you're making that up or whether it's your imagination or whether you're getting something from somewhere else? Well, of course it does. If you expect to get the right answer, it has to be out of the database. You have to be getting the data from another source. There your imagination will not do. Okay? But there, you just need to be open and let it come in. Don't make it come in. Don't reach out and try to grab it. That's a big mistake. People go out and they want to grab that information. They want to get it. Just open yourself to it. Be aware of it. Be open-minded. Say, okay, this is what my intent is. This is what I'd like to get, and then see what happens. Don't think about it. Don't analyze it. Don't be afraid it won't happen. Don't be afraid of not getting it. Just let all the fear, let all the ego, let everything go, and just be. Turn your intellect off. No judging, no analysis, no thinking. Just follow my voice, listen to it carefully, and do without trying, without thinking. So what matters for, let's say, healing isn't that you're really looking at the real health body. That's irrelevant. There is no real health body. It's just data. Okay? What's important is that you have a clear, focused intent. And you do that by letting everything else go. There's nothing in your reality but my voice and what you're doing. Just executing what's being asked of you. That's all. Everything else is gone. Don't think about anything else. Don't do anything else. And if you find yourself thinking about something else or starting to second guess, talking to yourself over the shoulder there and saying, oh, what are you doing? You're not doing that right. Just cut it out and get back to it. Everything's gentle. Nothing's forced. Okay? Don't try too hard. There's something very, very fundamental about beginner's luck, right? It's because beginners know they don't know what they're doing, so they're not nervous about it. They're just open. All right, I'll try it. I'll grab the bowling ball and I'll throw it and I'll see what happens. Oh, then they're really good at it. And then they start to say, oh, I'd really like to do it good now. Now they try. And it rolls a gutter ball every time because they're trying, you see. That's just the way it is. So what we want you to do is not try. Just be a beginner. Just be open. See what happens. That's the attitude that's going to get you most success. Not only tonight, but all the time. That'll get you the most success. All right, so know who you go, no fear, no expectations. Have no expectations whatsoever. It's not about whether you get it right. This is not a test. You're not going to be graded. No one will know whether you got it right but you. So let go of all of your performance anxiety about getting it right. You're just going to listen. You're just going to learn some tools, and then you're going to take these tools home, and hopefully you will practice and work at them. And in 3 weeks to a month, maybe 6 months, you should begin to get good at them, and you should begin to get some feedback back. And the feedback will say, gee, when I do it this way, it seems to work most of the time. When I do it that way, I'm wrong. I don't get the right results back. Well, then start doing it more that way and less of the way that's wrong. It's an iterative process. Don't expect to be good at it right away. But I would say in, a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, if you worked at this every day in 3 months, you'd be good at it. You'd be starting to get good data to where you actually are getting your remote viewing targets right, and you're healing people. It's not very hard. It doesn't take very long. So, but you have to be consistent. You have to work at it. You have to do the things that work, let go of the things that don't. Use the symbols that work with you. It's good when you go through meditation is to start with a point consciousness. Point consciousness is basically where you're only aware of one thing, and that's that you exist, that you're conscious. Now that doesn't mean if there's a noise in the room that you won't hear it. You can always parallel process. It just means that when you hear that noise, it doesn't bother you. Don't operate on it. You don't grab hold of it. You don't attach to it. Okay? You just let it be. It's just there, meaningless. Okay, so that's what we're doing. All right, now, the right approach, like I say, no one's checking answers. The point is not the result. Okay, the reason we're doing this isn't because of the results we're going to get. Results are going to be nice, but it's the process that we're going through. It's the process that's in the tools that you'll learn. That's what's significant. Okay, this is about your learning experience. This is an experiment, trying something a completely new way, without ritual, without going into meditation states first, without any of that stuff that you're used to doing, and just see what happens in this experiment. Forget all your usual techniques, forget all your usual preparation and relaxation, forget formal meditation, just let your intent direct the action. If you work at this, you will find that that's all you ever need to do. You can do it in seconds, you can do it on a crowded bus, you can even do it while you're having a conversation with someone. You don't need all that other stuff. But you have to work at it a little bit until you get that. Don't try to do it, let it happen, let the information come to you, execute to the best of your ability, participate, observe what happens with open-minded skepticism. You are just an independent, detached observer. You don't care how it comes out. It just comes out however it does, right? No expectations. Whatever happens, happens. Get into it, be immersed, 100% focused on my voice. Ignore all the background sounds. Doesn't mean that don't hear them, just ignore them. They're not important. No intellectual control, no analysis. Now, these things sound easy, right? But they're not. They're not. They're really hard. We analyze everything. We always question, we always analyze. So you need to turn that off as best you can. Okay, forget about the answers being rational or making sense. Okay. A lot of times your answers in remote viewing won't make any sense. Stop trying to make sense of them. Just report what you get. Okay. For instance, here's a little example, a typical kind of remote viewing thing. You know, you're doing a remote viewing, and what do you get? You remote view, and you get, a sunny beach. And you see that sunny beach for about 3 seconds, and immediately it goes into an old rerun of a Charlie Chan movie. You go, what? That doesn't make any sense. So you throw that away and say, I'm obviously not in the right state. This isn't working for me. And you know what the target was? It was a pair of sunglasses made in China, you see. So China got the Charlie Chan movie going, and the sunglasses is why you ended up with a beach, you see. And you didn't interpret the data right. You interpreted it in a way that just didn't make any sense to you. So don't throw out stuff that doesn't make sense. Don't say, oh, this is nonsense. You know, I can't make any sense of that. Just get the data, however it is, and write it down however you get it. Draw the picture. And if it just looks like a squiggle like this and a line through it, and that doesn't mean anything to you, just make your squiggle with your line through it. You see? Don't operate on it with your intellect. Tell your intellect to sit down and be quiet. You don't need your intellect in this process. Okay? No performance anxiety. We're going to do some remote viewing, and we're going to do it in multiple approaches. And I'm just doing this to you in multiple approaches. This isn't necessarily a wise thing to do, but it's going to give you more tools. And I'm really not so much interested in you getting right answers as in giving you process and tools. It makes it difficult, but each time you do a different process, we're going to remote view it this way and then that way. You see, different ways. Each way, try to make it a completely new experiment. In other words, if the first time you got little pink dots, don't expect little pink dots the second time. Expect nothing. Just say, all right, that was that. I got little pink dots. I'll write that down. Next time, get big blue circles or something. That's okay. Just write that down. Each time is just independent. Don't bias your next time from your last time. Very hard to do, because once you get something, then you kind of get attached to it. Because you figure if you get something different, then it's inconsistent, and then you must be wrong, and then you're doing it wrong, and et cetera, you get into a judgmental thing. All right. Just do the best you can. If I'm going too fast, don't worry about it. Finish up, catch up later. Low stress. Relax. Now we're going to go to this altered state. We're going to do this. You're going to just go to it, and you're going to come back. You're going to write down stuff in your little answer sheet there. You're going to draw what you see. You're going to describe things, and then you're going to go right back to it. And then you're going to come back and you do some more. We're going to go back and forth a whole bunch of times. Okay, so don't do any talking. Don't do anything other than just come, do what you have to do, and go back, because you don't want to disturb other people. Okay, so it's all, we're going to be silent now till we get done. I'll tell you when the exercises are all over. Yeah, don't impose your metaphors and your interpretations. Just draw what you see. All right. That brings us to the exercises. There's going to be 2 diagnosing and healing exercises. But first we're going to diagnose, then we're going to heal. Then we're going to do 3 remote viewing exercises. And all of these are designed to give you some different set of tools and ideas of ways of approaching these problems. Okay, take the next 30 seconds to get comfortable, kind of a nice seating position where you won't feel uncomfortable. Take a deep breath. And if you end up in a belief trap problem or some other issue, just ignore it and go along the best you can. Don't disturb anybody. And if you're disturbed, don't worry about it. Let it go. Just resume. Give my voice 100% of your attention. Do not intellectualize, analyze, judge, struggle with anything. This must be a zero anxiety exercise. Now, for those people watching the video, this will be a video one day, intend that you are looking at these people and remote viewing objects as they were on September 24th, 2011. Your efforts to diagnose and heal will still be applied and generally promote their better health. Whether the remote viewing test objects still exist or not makes no difference. You will still see them as they were on September 24, 2011. Okay, let everything else but my voice fall out of your mind. But first, I want you to listen to the background. Listen carefully to the background noises that you hear. Okay, now that you know what they are, ignore them. Let them go. They're not important. See or imagine a 3D humanoid outline, like a thick gingerbread cookie. Intend clearly that this humanoid outline represents the physical health energy body of Melvin D. as it exists at this moment, and then hold that intent. Intend clearly that the energy that represents health in this energy body be white, and what represents a health problem be dark. The more serious the problem, the darker the energy looks, and then hold that intent. Intend that the humanoid shape's back is facing you. Its right side is now the same as your right side. Hold that intent. Now notice where the dark areas are and which are most dark. With your attention on the dark spots, rotate the image of your viewing angle so you are looking at the side view. Now rotate further around and look at the front view. You're now looking at the health energy body of Melvin D. face on, the front view. Now, without losing your altered state, open your eyes and roughly draw what you have seen. Then immediately return to viewing the health energy body. Now repeat the last few steps and check to see if you get the same thing. Make sure you have drawn it more or less correctly. Make corrections as needed. You should now be viewing the energy body of Melvin D. Diagnosis is complete, but continue to look at the health energy body of Melvin D. Now use your intent to direct a beam of high-powered, intensely bright white light to each dark area. Notice how this intensely powerful light beam easily restores the dark problem areas back to a healthy, very bright white color. Continue until there are no dark areas left. Now use the beam to make the entire energy body glow with intense white light. If the white is so bright that it hurts your eyes, put on some sunglasses and crank the brightness up even further. Now intend clearly that this energy body stay a super bright, healthy white for a long, long time. Intend that the energy that you have placed on this body is so great that it will take the energy body a very, very long time to absorb all of it, and hold that intent. Okay, now let that image go and simply float in the void for a moment. Okay, experiment 2. See or imagine a 3D humanoid outline. Intend clearly that this humanoid outline represents the physical health energy body of Wanda D, as it is at this moment. Then hold that intent. Intend clearly that the energy that represents health in this energy body be white, and that what represents a health problem be dark. The more serious the problem, the darker the energy looks. Hold that intent. Intend that the humanoid's shape's back is facing you. Its right side is now the same as your right side. Hold that intent. Notice where the dark areas are and which are most dark. Now switch the color scheme. Clearly intend that from this moment forward, healthy tissue will be a beautiful, shiny black, and unhealthy tissue will be a dirty white. The more serious the problem, the brighter the white energy looks. The worst problems glow with intense luminosity, with beams of white light protruding from the afflicted areas. Tiny afflicted areas, even single cells, will be visible in this view. Now switch your intent back to the original color scheme. White is healthy and black is unhealthy. Hold that intent. With your attention on the dark spots, rotate the image of your viewing angle so you are looking at the side view. Then move on to the front view. Now go back to the side view. Back to the back view, then rotate around to the front view again. Without losing your altered state, open your eyes and roughly draw what you have seen. Then immediately return to viewing the health energy body of Wanda D. Okay. You should now be viewing the energy body of Wanda D. Zoom in for a closer look. Get closer and closer until you can see the individual cells, then the insides of individual cells. Look for the problem at the cellular level. Look for the problem cells. Intend to see problems inside the cell in red. Now repair and heal an individual cell. Use your white energy beam to turn that cell to a brilliant white color. Intend clearly that every afflicted cell be changed in the same way as the one you just healed. Watch them all instantly turn bright white as they follow your intent and take on the healthy characteristics of the one cell you just healed. Zoom back out to the original view. Again, look at the total health energy body of Wanda D. Now use your intent to direct a beam of high-powered, intensely bright white light to make the entire energy body glow with intense white light. While you do this, intend that the energy body stays super bright, healthy white for a long time. Intend that the energy you have placed on this body is so great that it will take the energy body a long, long time to absorb all of it. Okay, let that image go and simply float in the void for a moment. Experiment 3. I have a box on the table to my right with a big 3 written on it. Intend to have an image of what is in the box put on a screen in front of you. Remember what you see. Now put that result aside. Now move your vision to the box, and with no expectations of what you might see, look through the box to view what is in it. Now put that result aside. Next, get a sense or feel for the utility of what is in the box. What does it do? What is its uses and functions? See what is in the box in its natural environment being used. Without losing your altered state, open your eyes and write down or draw what you saw each time. Then immediately return to float in the void. Experiment 4. Intend to go to a spot on the surface of the earth that has these coordinates: 48 degrees, 51 minutes, and 29.888 seconds north, and 2 degrees, 17 minutes, and 40.2 seconds east. Look around. What do you see? Okay, open your eyes and write down what you saw. Then immediately return to float in the void. Experiment 5. There is a red and white striped box with the number 5 on it, in which I have placed something. Find out what it is. Now put that result aside, move your vision to the box itself with no expectations of what you might see. Look through the box to view the object. Now put that result aside. Next, get a sense of the feel for or the utility of the object. What does it do? What is its use and function? See it in its natural environment being used. Without losing your altered state, open your eyes and write down or draw what you saw each time, then immediately return to the void. Lastly, I will give you a few minutes to remote view or heal or diagnose a subject of your choice. Okay, open your eyes and let the experience go. Slowly and gradually re-embrace the physical world. After you have fully returned, write down any notes on any of the experiments you might wish to remember or any comments or questions that may have come up. Take as much time as you need. Okay, we're done with this exercise, and we're going to get the results. First we had on experiment 1, okay, was Melvin D. Melvin D had high blood pressure and prostate cancer. The second experiment, number 2, was Wanda D. Wanda D has to have kidney dialysis and high blood pressure. Number 3 is what was in the box with the big number 3 on it. An apple core. Okay, number 4, I gave you coordinates. It was the Eiffel Tower. The last thing that was in the red and white striped box was a magnifying glass. Now let's talk about these things a little bit. The first experiment, we had high blood pressure and prostate cancer. Now high blood pressure is a systematic thing, right? It's a system thing. It doesn't locate itself in a spot. When you get something like high blood pressure or somebody has the flu or something else that's systemic, what you're going to get is that the whole gingerbread cookie man, the whole humanoid shape will just turn kind of gray. It won't be dark black. It'll just be kind of gray, depending on the severity of what it is, how threatening it is. So high blood pressure should just show up not as a spot, but as a overall, the whole system, you see. Now, the prostate cancer should have been located. Okay. You should have found that spot then would have been located. Now, the second one was kidney dialysis. The kidneys weren't functioning properly. Okay, you should have found the 2 spots on either side that would represent kidneys. And high blood pressure, again, your humanoid shape would have been, the whole shape would have been a kind of a gray. Now you notice we flipped color schemes here. We said that black is healthy and white is the problem. That's a good thing to do when you're looking for individual cellular issues. Because if you're looking for a black problem and that black is a tiny speck, like a little fly speck, you often will just not notice it. You say, all right, I'm looking for, what are the problems here? And the problem here is that there are 3 cells that are still remaining cancer cells after the radiation treatment's been done. You see, you won't see them as black problem on a white background because it's tiny little specks you can't see. But if you turn it the other way around and you've got those cells radiating white on a black background, well, there they are. They stand right out. So you see, you can change the output format of the data with your intent to suit the problem. Now, in this case, you would have seen the reverse in the kidney area, the reverse colors in the kidney area. Okay. Also, I think this is one where we looked at cells. This is kind of a technique for leveraging what you do on a cellular level to a lot of cells. You can't go along and heal every cell. There's too many of them, millions of cells. And you can work at a cellular level, though, and then say, and I want all the rest to look like this one. It's done. See, an intent. These are just mind tricks. These are tools to help you focus your intent on what you're doing. All right, now the alpacore. When you see this alpacore, you could have gotten a general image of something that was kind of circular, maybe even a circle in a circle. You may have seen it as a flower, with petals of a flower. It's your interpretation. You get the data and you tend to, it's just habit. It's very hard to train a remote viewer because you have to train them out of all these habits that they have. Your habit is to identify whatever it is you see. Put it in a category, give it a name, and say what it is. To just see it and then write it down is very difficult. So you may have seen a flower. You may have seen like a stained glass window because it's got the veins in it. You may have seen sun. A sun's like a circle with rays going out. So there's all sorts of ways you could have seen this and gotten the data, but misinterpreted, how you interpret the image. So I did one before, and I had a cork opener. The things that have the handles, and you screw in the cork and then you pull the handles down, and I had it sitting in a box, and the hands of it were sitting out like this, angle. They were in the box, and you wouldn't believe how many people saw a clock. You see, they saw all those handles sticking out, and what did that mean to them? What did that metaphor mean to them? A clock, a thing with things sticking out from the center, you see. So it's how you interpret it. All right, now the Eiffel Tower, we talked about just coordinates. Most of you probably have no idea what 48 degrees, 51 minutes, and 29.88 seconds north means as far as a spot on the globe. But it doesn't matter, you see. Remote viewers choose to use coordinates for most of their remote viewing. They like the idea of coordinates. Why? Because they have no idea where that might be. That means they stop second guessing. It's easier for them to stop second guessing what might be there. If somebody said, I want you to go, to the middle of Manhattan and look, and suddenly they see all the buildings, they see the traffic, they start building Manhattan in their mind, you see, and that just gets in their way. So you just go to these coordinates, and they say, all right, I'll go to those coordinates to look around. So how do they end up in the right place? Because somebody knows what those coordinates lead to. And as long as you just go to the coordinates that were given to me, whatever they are, wherever they go, just go to those coordinates. You'll get there, you see. You don't need to know anything about coordinates. Okay, and that was the Eiffel Tower. And you may have gotten an arrow, something pointy. You may have seen a dart. You may have, just got a line. You may have gotten a triangle. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you could have gotten out there that would have been representative of that shape. And the last thing with the magnifying glass, that was interesting in 2 ways. You notice I didn't tell you where it was. I said, I have a red and white box with a 5 on it. Go see what's in it. I didn't tell you where it was. The other one I told you was sitting on the table over here. Well, the one with the red box with the stripes and the magnifying glass in it is sitting on my desk at home in Alabama. You see, And what I wanted you to realize, it doesn't matter where it is. You don't need directions. You don't need to be told things like that. Just, I want to go see the red box with stripes that he's talking about and see what's in it. That's good enough. That identifies it uniquely. You see? This larger conscious system is one smart cookie. It knows. It has that data. So that's why that one got added. And it really makes no difference whether it's here or whether that red box with the 5 on it was, in China. Would have made no difference. It could have been on a space shuttle. It wouldn't have made any difference. You just want to go to the red box that's being talked about with the stripes on it and see what's in it. Okay. So those are the exercises. You can kind of judge yourself what you got and how well you did. And you realize that sometimes it's hard to have no expectations, beliefs, analysis, or fear, that your mind just has a natural tendency to go out there and start operating on what you're getting and second guessing and judging. So that's usually the hard part for people, to get their intellect to turn off. Secondly, when you're doing the remote viewing, you probably found out that you tended to interpret it into images that you knew, as opposed to just getting what you got. You look at this and you say, oh, a flower. Look, I see it's got a center and it's got these petals around it. You don't look at it. It may not be in your own experience that's an apple core. You may have never seen an apple core, so you make it into something that you have seen, something that it reminds you of. This is the way we all communicate. This is why we have such trouble communicating with another person. This is what we do all the time. Okay, so the hard part was probably getting the intellect to sit down and be quiet. Clearly holding multiple intents. You notice first you had to have a humanoid shape, and you had to hold that. You couldn't let that go. You had to hold on to that intent. Then you had to have the energy body. Then you had to have the color scheme. And while you had the color scheme, you couldn't just let the intent go about the humanoid shape. You see, you have to build all these intents up and hold on to them so that you're intending a humanoid shape that's an energy body that has, white that's good and black that's, all these intents have to be stacked together. So I said, and hold it. Hold on to all those intents, because now you're having a complicated intent that's got 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 pieces to it. And you have to hold all those intents at once so you can build them up layer by layer. Notice that we did white on black, black on white. Makes no difference. You can make any color scheme you want. Now what about that bright energy beam we used to heal with? That bright energy beam, it's just a metaphor. Why do we need that metaphor? Because in our virtual reality mindset, we don't believe we can affect anything unless we do something to it. Therefore, we give you a beam so you can do something to it, because otherwise, how could you possibly change it if you're not going to do anything to it? You see, it's just a belief you have. So to overcome that belief, we have to give you a white energy beam. There is no such thing as energy either. It's just a metaphor. It's data. There is no energy. There is no light. Those are metaphors, tools. They help us translate things back into an experience set that we can discuss, that we know, that we can feel, that we connect to. That's all they are. Okay? So the color scheme doesn't matter. The light is just a metaphor. The health aura was just a metaphor. It was data that you were collecting when you were doing that diagnosing. You were going with your metaphor and you wanted to get here's a gingerbread cookie, and it's representing the health aura of somebody. That intent says, go into the database, to the past database, and get hold of what that person's health body looks and present it to me in the form of black and white images on a humanoid shape. That's the intent. The system responds, and that's what you get. Okay? Because it's easier to do it in pictures than it is to say, write me a paragraph, and I'll read about it. That's a lot harder to do. A lot less bandwidth in that information. All right, we did the right, left, back. We went all the way around. The reason that's important is because if you look front to back and you may see a real dark thing right here, and you may say, oh, that's right, that's right where his heart is. It may not be my heart at all. It may be a big spot on my back. You see, I may have a skin cancer in the middle of my back, It just happens to be my heart's on the other side of that, but you see that over on that side, so you come to the wrong thing. You go around to the side, and suddenly you can tell it's on the back rather than in the front. You see, so you need these different views so that you can actually locate things. So you look from the front, you look from the back, you look from the side, and you collect all that data. Now you get a much better idea of left to right and so on. And if you don't mention, if you just said, just show me the shape, because if you're not taking evidence and you're just healing, it doesn't really make any difference whether it's on the right side or the left side or whatever. You're just working on it. So you don't have to specify, I'm looking in this direction. Just do it. It doesn't matter. But if you're collecting evidence, it's nice to know that if there was a problem on the left side, you saw it on the left side. So that's the only reason for using that tool, is just because you're trying to collect evidence, so you're trying to get as detailed as much evidence as possible. Now, some people have a perverse thing that happens to them here, is every time they see something on the left, it's the right, and every time they see something on the right, it's the left. No matter what they do, it always is just the opposite. Well, it's easy. Whatever it is you see, say it's on the opposite side. You know, as soon as you do that, it'll probably switch. But these things sometimes happen because it's symmetry. People who have dyslexia tend to sometimes flip symmetry. You see, so you might not always get left and right correct. You may get it backwards. That just depends. You should have done parallel processing. You were listening to me while you were working at NPR. You were coming, you were going, you were writing, you were going back. And when you went back, it should have been real quick to just drop right back into that space where you were, come out of that space, drop back in that space. That while you're in that space, you're listening to me. So we did parallel processing. We jumped in and out quickly. We did the diagnosis, accessing the database by intent. We healed by intent. Now the white light intensity. Okay, when we make the light more intense, light's just a tool, remember, it's a metaphor. That intensity has to do with the intensity of our intent. So as we make that light more intense, that's really a tool for helping us make our intent more focused, more intense. That's the metaphoric connection, okay? We leverage cells, make all the cells like this one. That's real handy. Okay, we used other colors. We did several approaches to the remote viewing, and I know it's difficult to not have the data from one cloud to data, make expectations to the next. But I wanted to show you different ways of remote viewing. You see, remote viewing doesn't have to just be about a place. Look around a place, you kind of get this remote viewing as a geography problem. You're going to go to a place and see what's going on. You don't have to just go to a place. You can find a function. You can find a purpose. You can remote view in the future. You can go to a future place. Go to something that hasn't happened yet, a situation that hasn't materialized. You can remote view that. You just need a clear intent. Okay? So, reject nothing. Just be open to everything. You're an independent, detached observer. All right, some things to consider. This was about the process, not about the results. Okay, was it real? Well, I'll say, was the data accurate? If the data was accurate that you got, okay, then several things must have happened. If that data was accurate, say for the diagnosis, then that means you were doing everything right and you were paying attention to the data you got. Now, you may have gotten data, but not paid any attention to it. If your intellect was sitting there second guessing, am I really seeing it? My gingerbread cookie keeps dissolving. Oh, I'm having this problem. If you're in there with your mind spinning, then you probably didn't get too much. Even if you got the data, you wouldn't have noticed it because while your mind was spinning, you weren't paying attention to any information that came into your mind. Your mind was busy jabbering about some kind of a problem and making sure you're doing it right. Okay, so those are the things that can go wrong. The speed, I kept moving you along. I didn't give you very much time to do anything. That was intentional. By making you go fast, it makes it hard for you to get into these endless thinking loops. You stop, intellectualizing about it. I don't give you time to think about it. Just do it. And remote viewers find that the very first image that jumps into their mind is usually the right one. If they sit and think about it a while, they just confuse themselves. The very first thing, they say, oh, what's there? Blink, all right, that's it. Describe that. Don't sit around and say, well, what was that? Did I see it right? Well, let me try that again. Then you just confuse yourself. Just first thing that jumps into your mind, be open. Open your mind. You see something, you're done. Write it down. That's much better. The more you try to analyze it, the more you try to repeat it and analyze it, do statistics on it, was it really like that? You just confuse yourself. And pretty soon you don't know what it was that you saw. It's just all muddled up. So the speed was intentional, clear input, well-defined. Your intent has to be clear and well-defined. Otherwise, it's the garbage in, garbage out principle. Specific versus general. You can do specific things like healing a particular cell, healing a particular tumor, healing a very pinpointed thing. You can go and say, well, what's wrong with this person? Oh, the alveoli on their lungs are not developed well enough, so we need to increase that development of those particular structures. And you can go and just work on developing those structures. It's a very precise sort of thing. Or you can do general things like feel better, live long, feel good, may peace be with you, health, peace and happiness. Use this energy for your general health. You can do very general things. The more specific you are, usually the more effective you are if it's a very specific problem. Okay, if somebody, what they have is a tumor, and you just give them, here's some general energy, good health, you won't be nearly as effective as if you work on that tumor, and if it's a particular kind of tumor that has a particular kind of whatever, you'll be more successful if you deal with it that way. In other words, the more specific you can get, the better. But some things, general is all you can do. Sometimes you're not supposed to work on somebody at all. It's another thing we'll have to talk about. Sometimes you'll try to do the healing, you'll put some white energy on them and it's gone. Or as soon as you blink and look away, it's gone. And it's just like it's not working, it's not helping, you just don't seem to be able to get any traction on it. That's probably a problem where they need the illness. The illness is valuable in teaching lessons. It's a part of life. You don't want to take somebody's life experiences away. They need them. Okay? And you will get that message, and when it does, don't force yourself. It's not your idea is to kick in the gate and make things happen the way you want. The idea is to facilitate somebody else doing what they want. You're the facilitator. You're going to help them, but they have to want it themselves. If they really don't, if they're enjoying their sickness, or if they need that sickness for a lesson, or somebody attached to them, some loved one needs that sickness of theirs for a lesson or whatever, then you need to butt out. You generally will get that idea by the way your energy is accepted. If it's just accepted and it works easily for you, then it's a good thing to do. If it's pushback on it, you ought to probably just let it go. Okay, if you want to make up your own tools, please do that. We just used energy beam. Tomorrow when we do this, we're going to drag out a bunch of other tools, things that you might be able to use. We used a little scheme of the colors and making these cells like all the rest. We used a couple of little tools here. These are things, make up your own. They're your tools, they're your metaphors. What can better focus your energy than your own metaphor for what it is you're trying to do? Okay, now most of the healing modalities all have their own metaphors. Some of you, no doubt, are Reiki practitioners, and you have your own metaphors. You have your own symbols and ways that you apply them. These are all just tools. And you can learn another person's tools, and you can be effective with them, because some tools, like a light beam, are kind of general. They work good for everybody. But other tools are more specific. And some individual used these tools and was very successful for them, and then they teach other people to use the same tools. You may or may not be successful with somebody else's tools. They may just not be your thing. Okay, so use your own. Now, if you want to be maximum effective in your healing, revisit it several times a day. Matter of fact, the best thing is to have it in the back of your mind all day long. So you start out and you do what we did. You heal them, you fill them full of bright light and good health. And then in the back of your mind, you keep that thought all day long. Now, what I mean by keep it in the back of your mind, let's say that you had an appointment, a very, very important appointment. And if you made this appointment, chances are somebody would hand you $1 million, or you were going to get a great promotion or something. It was an awards appointment, and you were going to be given an award. And well, you'd have that in the back of your mind all day long. You'd be looking at your watch every hour to see, whether it was time yet, because you wouldn't want to miss it. You'd be cognizant of it. You'd be focused that it's there. Even though you're going about your daily job, you're doing what you normally do, it's just there in the back of your mind. That's what you have to do with healing. You make that white light and you just keep that in the back of your mind. That white that on that person, that black spot's gone and it's brilliant white and it stays that way, and you just kind of glance at it. Oh yeah, it's still bright white, still brilliant. Oh, there it slipped a little. Oh, let's just pump it up. And you can just do that in seconds, just like we did here. You don't have to you have to light your incense and cross your legs and ring a bell and do all that stuff that normally you do with relaxation. So revisit it, keep it in your mind. Every couple of hours, just think about it and say, all right, let's push a little more energy to that. Just keep doing it. Do that for about 2 solid weeks as you heal someone, and you will see that you almost always get results. If you just do it once and forget about it, if you're good, you might get some results out of that. If you're just a beginner, you'll do a whole lot better if you do it all day, in the back of your mind, plus 3 or 4 or 5 times a day in the front of your mind, and do all of that for a couple of weeks. It's cumulative. It's the amount of energy you put into it. Now, being cumulative means if you and 5 other people all do it the same, then if you're all of the same strength and all have the same focus, you'll get 5 times more energy put on it. Or if you do it 5 times longer than the group of 5. If the group of 5 do it for 1 minute and you do it by yourself for 5 minutes, then you probably do about as much as they do. It's a cumulative kind of thing. Groups will put more power at a shorter period of time, a bigger punch. But some illnesses, punch is what you need. Some illnesses, steady, constant pressure is what you need. And you'll learn this from experience, of which are which. Okay. The typical reasons why it might not have worked for you. I think we've gone over these. I won't say too much about it. The 4 big problems are noise in your mind. Your mind isn't steady. Constant chatter, analysis, guessing, lack of steady focus, kind of popping in and out of focus. It's not a steady thing. Your focus for your imagination in the exercise was probably fine. Probably nobody had any trouble doing that imagination. That's because there was no anxiety or no stress in that. Oh, this is just my imagination. You see, you don't have any ego attached to it. It's just my imagination. You need to have the same attitude toward your healing. You have to hold those multiple intents with a steady focus. You have to have, you're more effective in this if you can get into what I call point consciousness. Point consciousness is that state when you meditate, you get to a point where all this reality just is gone. You're an awareness, a consciousness floating in a black void. That's all you are. That's what I call by point consciousness. At that point, your mind is focused. Now from there, if you have intents, your intents are a lot more focused and therefore a lot more effective. So it's a good place to go. And how do we get to there? Meditation. That's what's meditation for. It learns to get the noise out of our mind so we don't constantly have all these thoughts running through. So that's what intention's good for. But you can get to that place once you have a little practice. And most of you have practiced a lot in meditation and done a lot of this sort of thing. You can probably go there just like that. You probably don't need a lot of process to get there. And eventually that's the way it is. You let the meditation go. You don't need the meditation either. Meditation is a tool. You can just go there. It's a good tool. Beliefs could be a problem. Now these beliefs are probably non-intellectual. You can have a belief that it couldn't possibly be that easy, that it's impossible, that it won't work for you. All those kinds of beliefs will get in the way. Fear of being wrong. There's a lot of, when you do testing with people, it's the beginner's concept, and you say, okay, try this out. And people are a lot more intuitive and get a lot more right answers immediately, and then afterwards it disintegrates. And that's because they get performance anxiety. Oh, gee, I did good there. All right, see if I can't do better. Now they start trying rather than just, oh, let's see what happens. And suddenly they can't do it worth a damn when before they did just fine. See, that's a problem. Inability to remain detached. Sometimes it's hard to work on people you care about a lot. Your son or daughter or mother or father or somebody, or even yourself. Some people just get blocked there because they can't be detached. The outcome's too important to them. So they're attached to an outcome, they're not going to be very effective. You need to just be detached. All right, so it's not about you. Being a detached observer takes practice like being a good listener. So all these things, I've just given you some tools that if you practice with them, you'll be able to find those evidential points that you need to be able to tell you that this is real and not just your imagination. That's what you need, is that evidence. You have to do it that way. Otherwise, you never really know, and you're always second guessing, and that's not helpful. The second thing is you'll find that you can then heal somebody while you're talking to them. You don't have to go into, it doesn't have to be such a big deal that takes up a lot of time. You can talk to somebody and they can be telling you how they have a liver that quivers and it's this and that, and while they're talking to you, you can be doing a healing process. It gets easier, less time, more efficient. So that's another kind of good thing that can come out of this. All right, that's all. I hope you had a lot of good fun, and tomorrow we're going to talk mostly about the larger reality. How do you get access? What do you find there? And we're going to do another one of these experiential exercises. It's going to have a couple of more healings and then some more remote viewings. And when you do it the second time, maybe you'll be more relaxed because we've been through it this time and you kind of know what to expect. It's going to be very similar to this one. Of course, it's all going to be different objects and different people and that sort of thing.
First, Thomas, thank you very much for the information you provided today and for coming all the way here to Calgary. We really appreciate that. And thanks to Beth, too, for her amazing efforts to bring this together. We really appreciate both of you showing up. This goes back to the double slit experiment again. I keep going back to that one. And specifically Einstein and his concept of what reality was compared to what your big toe is. Did Einstein recognize that the availability of data in this reality would cause the wave function to collapse?
He did. He did realize that because that was basically what the Copenhagen statement was all about. That was the fact, that the availability of the data in this reality seemed to be what caused the wave function to collapse. So Einstein knew that that's what the experiment said. He didn't particularly like it. He didn't really want to believe it, and he made a couple of disparaging comments, about it. He said, "I don't believe that God plays dice, with reality." That's not exactly what he said. It was some kind of a famous quote like that from Einstein. And he thought there must be some other explanation. So he didn't like it, but he knew it. That was, those were the established facts of the experiment, and people just didn't know what to do with it. And I think most of you felt the same way. When you see that experiment and you say, and then what happened, Well, they burned the envelopes and now you get this other pattern. It's like, really? That's why? I think he was kind of like that as well.
Okay. I have three. The questions 1, 2, and 3 here. And I apologize, and we can go over this one if you want, or you can say you already answered it, but I'm still not satisfied with the answer. If the observer in the double slit experiment perishes, and again, this goes back to I open the envelopes and nobody else sees the answers, and I put it back in the safe, and then I go out and get hit by a truck. Mm-hmm. Does the existence of the data not still exist in the consciousness state? And again, so I have the information's in my consciousness, right, but isn't it already filtered into the general consciousness where everybody has access to?
No. This is just about the virtual reality. It's not about the larger reality. This rule set is for the virtual reality. Okay, so we have the rule set. The rule set is a probabilistic statistical reality, and this virtual reality works that way. Now, the fact that in the consciousness system, there's data, doesn't make any difference. It has nothing to do with that. This virtual reality cannot be inconsistent. You cannot have this measured data that says, it went through a slit, this data said it didn't, existing in the reality. You can't have two measured datas conflicting with each other. It all has to be consistent. It doesn't matter what's in other realities. It's only about this virtual reality. It's just a part of the rule set in this game. So that's why that doesn't really matter. So once that information was taken out of this virtual reality, it's not in here anymore. So then it's not inconsistent in this virtual reality that the information's different than it was to that person. It can be different now for the next person because there's no inconsistency here. That person doesn't exist anymore. You see?
So then if I understand, the data stays in the virtual state, not in the conscious.
All of this is consciousness. The virtual reality is a creation of consciousness, but it's a subset. So here's this subset, this virtual reality that's evolved, and there's these players that are playing characters here in this virtual reality. And the virtual reality is defining the constraints with which their characters can interact and do things. Okay, now inside that virtual reality, if there's information that conflicts, it messes up the virtual reality. It's no longer a good virtual reality. So as long as there's no information that conflicts in that virtual reality, then fine. Anything can happen in there that doesn't conflict with the rule set or with historical consistency. As long as those rules are met in the virtual reality, then anything else is possible, you see. And yes, the whole thing's a product of consciousness, but this consciousness system's producing a virtual reality to be a nice, buttoned-down, consistent reality frame. And the rules are that you can't mess that up. You can't mess up that nice, consistent reality frame with you can't do an experiment and say, this experiment says that gravity falls up, this one says gravity makes everything fall down. They can't both be there at the same time, right? See, they're incompatible. So that's the problem. As long as compatibility is assured in the virtual reality, that's all that's necessary. Okay. So even though the whole thing is being done in consciousness. So that double slit experiment is just a virtual reality effect. It's not like that is a great truth that, that defines consciousness all over. It's just an effect that defines the virtual reality experience.
When we judge another individual or group, do we collapse the probability wave of their development? Is this judgment in conflict with free will?
No. We do affect other people. So, and I don't know if I'd limit it to just making a judgment, but you can send negative thoughts, to other people. That's what, that's what the voodoo and the people who hurt other people through mental effort, instead of healing them, they hurt them. You can do that sort of thing. So definitely you can affect other people. And yes, if you have an attitude toward groups or certain beliefs, then that attitude tends to spread because of your influence on other people. That's they call that the 100th monkey effect, where you have attitudes and you have knowledge and it just kind of spreads. Other people sort of pick it up. If you grow up in a racist environment, you're likely to be racist. Not because you really have an intellectual reason for that. You're just that because that's where everybody else is. You just pick up the ideas, you see. So we do influence each other, but it doesn't affect anybody else's free will. You still have that choice. There's all kinds of things that influence your choice. You get put in jail, you can't go home. You have to stay overnight in the jail. If you're poor, you can't buy a new Mercedes-Benz. There's lots of things that limit your choices. And if other people all, think one way and you think a different way, well, then you have to overcome that. You have to be able to take your position strongly enough that you overcome all that stuff that's kind of pushing you into conformity. So if you're thinking out of the box, you've got to overcome all those people who are afraid to think out of the box. So yes, we do, but it doesn't inflict anything on anybody else's free will. Your free will doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. Free will means that you get to make a choice of all the things that are in your decision space. And what that means is when somebody comes and is rude to you, so somebody comes up and they just don't like you for some reason, so they step on your foot, and they did it on purpose. Now you can react to that. You can get angry and shove them back. You can swear at them. You can tell them, don't ever do that again. You can threaten them. Or you can just maybe think that, boy, those people really have a problem. They must be really upset, angry. They must have a horrible life with that kind of an attitude, toward other people. Sure wouldn't want to be in their shoes or live that life. And maybe you might even think, is there anything I can do to help you? Do you have a problem that I could help you with? You have a different reaction. Maybe you react with compassion rather than with anger. That's your choice. See, that's these choices. That's in your decision space. You can act with compassion, you can act with anger, you can act with ego, you can act with love, and you have all these choices. And you still have that free will, even if everybody around you might act with anger. You don't have to. But you might have to be a little tougher in your resolve to be different than all the people around you. Well, now that's ego, isn't it? You have to be willing to stand up and be different. So it's all another opportunity. So if other people give you an opportunity to deal with your ego by being strong enough to stand up and be different, well, hey, you've just used that negative situation for a positive goal. You see, so it's not affecting your free will at all. Your free will, some of your choices may be easier or harder to do because of your situation, because of the friends you keep, but you still have a choice. It's still your choice to make them, and it's up to you to make the choices that help you grow. You see, that's the thing, so it could make your life harder. Now think about experiments that are going on. We talked about social science experiments in there, like double-blind and triple-blind, and that because the attitude of the experimenters affects the results of the experiment. Well, let's say there's an experimenting going on, and this experiment would make this researcher real famous and would be really good for him. And let's say he's got a nemesis over here that really wouldn't like that to be, wouldn't like that to work, because he doesn't want this guy to be famous or get anything, because he dislikes him. So he puts a lot of energy into it not working, and this guy puts a lot of energy into it working. Well, it doesn't influence anybody's free will. Life's like that, right? He has to overcome that. So if he has a lot of negative energy trying to keep whatever he's doing from working, then he has to have a very positive attitude to help come over it, because they're trying to push the probability that it doesn't work their way. He's trying to push the probability it works his way. It's just life's like that. There are people who will hamper you and make life difficult. You have to deal with it and grow up in spite of it.
Thank you.
This is a little bit of a personal question. How can we become more aware of what we're doing and where we're going? Like when I travel, I come back and I'm quite happy, but I don't really have a lot of this reality awareness of where I've been. Is that something that can be affected by intent, or it's not even an important thing to worry about?
Probably both. That can be affected by intent, and it's probably not really a very important thing to worry about. Probably the reason it happens, there's a couple of reasons why it might happen. One is, it may be that the larger conscious system feels that you're going to be more successful if you don't get intellectually involved. It could be that intellectual involvement, they think might be a hindrance rather than help. And that's often the case. When we get intellectually involved, we tend to mess things up. So by not being intellectually involved, you actually may be more successful than you think. Secondly, it could be that the information that you might get intellectually, that you would operate on here, may cause you some distress, may be difficult for you, may bend your reality, may twist some of your beliefs or something, and it may cause you problems. And you might not be ready to deal with those yet, so you just don't get it. So it may be positive, it may not be negative. But yes, you can work on your intent with that. And the way you work on your intent with that is you have to convince the larger conscious system that it would be in your best interests of growth and reducing your entropy to be more aware of what's going on. And you have to say, listen, if I really knew what was going on, I could be more effective, whatever it is. I could be more a part of it. I could learn more. I could grow more from the experience. I'd really like to be aware of this. Can you help me out here? And chances are you'll start getting more of it. And then you just keep encouraging that until you get it all. But basically make a good case for why that's a good thing for the system, is that you get to know more. And if you kind of get this feeling like, well, I'm not sure we want to, then say, well, look, try me. Let's see how it works. Give me a chance here. So work at it like that and see if you can't encourage the system to start letting you remember more and more over it. And the other thing is to be entirely open to whatever you get. And you have to be fearless. Sometimes we've had, when we first discovered the binaural beat, which became hemisync in the lab, we had lots and lots of people just come in. They didn't even know what they were doing. It was lie down and listen to this. They had no expectations or anything. Just lie down and listen to this and see what happens. We found that about 20% of them, as soon as they put on the headphones, within about 30 seconds, they were unconscious. Out. just like that. And the thing would quit, and within 30 seconds of the tape ending, they were awake, just like that. And they'd say, oh, I fell asleep. They didn't fall asleep. They don't fall asleep because the tape starts and then wake up because the tape ends. They could not deal with, they could not process the information that they were getting. They just weren't open to it and accepting to it, and whatever it was, and usually these were people that had, not always, but usually these were people that had a lot of distress and stress in their life. And when you get into that out-of-body state, often what you find is your fear. That's what you find. If you're conscious and you're awake, and I'm not sure what you do when you're not connected to it with your intellect, but you find your fear. So if the things that you're afraid of turn into actual physical things there. So you get if you went into a monster with big fangs, that's because that's the fear that something will get you. Well, when you're in the out-of-body state, you'll find something that will get you if that's a fear that you have. You start to live your fears. So people with much fear, or people with strong emotional problems, people that are into a lot of maybe family or relationship stress or something like that, they immediately get into this. There they are. They get into this place where they're eyeball to eyeball with themselves, raw, with no cover, nothing to filter it out, no way to sweep it under the rug, and they're just there, and it's an overload. They can't deal with it, don't want to deal with it, and they lose consciousness. So we've had that sort of thing all the time. That's probably not your problem, because you're working. I doubt that that's your problem, but there are reasons that people just blank out. And I was telling you the one about the click out. People that click out at the Monroe Institute, for the most part, at least when I was there and listened to people talk and say, well, at this point I just clicked out. That's the point where they couldn't tell whether it was real or their imagination, and they couldn't deal with that. They couldn't deal with that uncertainty. It just was unacceptable if they were lying there and going to imagine something. What a waste of time. If this isn't real, I can't be here and do it. I'm afraid it's not real, and I can't deal with the stress of that, so they're gone. So just be open. There it is. I'll deal with it. I'll accept it. It's fine. I'd like to do it. I think it would make me more effective. Help me out, and you'll probably find it'll help you out.
The only other thought I had is that I'm going somewhere where language and reality isn't helpful.
Language won't be a problem. All the communication there is telepathic. Language isn't a problem.
But I can't bring it back because I don't have words for it.
Now, that is a problem.
Yeah.
If you do something that is so outside of your own experience base, you don't have any metaphors, you don't have any symbols for it, it just doesn't translate. It's like you can't translate this into English. We can't translate this into your experience. There was a historical, the Spanish explorers that were into Mexico. There was one of the log books, one of the captains, and he found that the natives that he ran into, I guess mainly Yaqui Indians in Mexico, could not see his ship.
Yeah.
You've probably heard of that. They could not see his sailing ship. And they could see the little boat that came in from the ship, but they couldn't see the ship. Now, eventually, after a few days, I think they probably did. But at first, where did you guys come from? Well, and there's a big ship. What big ship? They just couldn't get it because it was out in their reality. They didn't have anything to translate it with. It wasn't even a giant canoe. It just wasn't anything you could say. So that is a problem. If you're going places and doing things that just don't have any counterpart here, then there's no way for you to bring it back because you can't turn it into thoughts or language. It's just there, and that may be what's going on. Then you might, if you want to change that, you might say, could you take me someplace else where I could translate this, into my own language and my own thoughts, because I'd like to have the experience, and see if you can't change it that way.
Okay, and I had one other question, and it was about, these 2 days have been about trying to understand this consciousness using a physicist's sense of how the world works.
Right.
So on this, nothing's real, but in this reality, what would other cultures, how would we know if there's someone with an opposite viewpoint that might be really interesting? I'm thinking of different cultures where, I was talking to someone Aboriginal who said the ancestors don't leave, they're always here. And I mean, I know that's, like nobody's gone, they're just in the next room sort of philosophy, but they really believe they have a totally different way of looking at consciousness. So is there anything else on this plane of existence that might be interesting to have a look at?
Oh, yes.
In cultural
Lots
terms?
of things that might be interesting to have a look at. Absolutely. The thing is, this is a model. Okay, what I've produced is a model of reality. What's unique about it and interesting about it, I think, is that it's a logical process model. It talks to the left brain people in the world. Mm-hmm. It talks to all the mechanics and the scientists and the engineers and the lawyers and the doctors and everybody that does logical process, for a living. And that's the way they think. All those left brain people right now are out there with nothing that they can connect to. There's tons and tons of right brain type things about spirituality and about reality models and that sort of stuff. They're all poetical, like what you just say. It's like going that's poetry. That's descriptive. It's not logical process. If you can relate to that, if you hear that, oh yeah, it's always all there. That rings with me. I resonate with that, you see. Then fine. That's good model for you because you can personally connect to it. You take a left brain engineer, he looks at that and he says, nah, that's a BS, doesn't mean anything to me. What do you mean everybody's here? Where are they? Let me find them. Let's count them, He wants to turn it into numbers in a physical search, you see. They can't deal with that. So here we have probably 70% of our population is probably left brain dominant. All the lawyers make all the politicians, right? And the scientists tell the politicians, a lot of, in our culture, a lot about what to think. I would say that science is our culture's religion. Mm. So we have the high priests of our culture are the scientists, and we have the politicians of our culture are the lawyers, and then we have the doctors, and we have all these other professionals, and most of them have the CEOs and the businessmen, and they're all left brain because it's all logical process is what they deal with. They're the ones running things. They have a lot of influence in our culture, and they're the ones that tell everybody else what to believe and what not to believe. So my thought was that what we needed was a description that reached into spirituality, reached into metaphysics, but it had to start with physics. You couldn't have metaphysics deriving physics because you couldn't get these left brain guys to start with metaphysics. Mm. You can have physics deriving metaphysics because they'll get on board with the physics and oh my God, it leads you to metaphysics, and this metaphysics makes sense. So, my model was basically designed for all those, left brain techies and bureaucrats and other people who do logical process so that there'd be something that they could read that would make sense to them and would maybe lead them to a better place of how to be because it would be logical to them. And another model, there's lots of models. Buddhism is a model of reality. And we mostly say the same thing. Any number of times I've stood up here and I've given a lecture and has somebody in the audience says, I've been studying Tibetan Buddhism for the last 3 decades, and you're saying the same thing. It's exactly the same. Well, sure, it should be exactly the same. It's just that Tibetan Buddhists use different words, different metaphors, different symbols, and they resonate with people of that culture, and they resonate with people who have that experience. They don't resonate with physicists at all. It resonates with those people, and it's just descriptive, though. It's all about, this is what happened to me, and here's what it means. It's not logical process. But those are good models, and why do I sound like a Tibetan Buddhist? Because there's only one truth. But you can approach that truth from many different directions. You see, there's one truth, but there's 1,000 different paths to get to that truth. And every one of those paths is valid. You say, is there any use in any of these other things? Well, sure there are. Everybody isn't going to travel one path. There's 1,000 paths, and it's good that there's 1,000 paths because there's 1,000 different kinds of people out here that need to follow those paths. And all those traditions, the shamanic traditions, I guess it started often with the Hindus about 4,000 BC. You have the Bhagavad Gita, have those two, and you can take all of it and you can see where that and my big toe are just like this. They're together. We're all one. All of this is illusion. I sound like the Buddha too, right? It's just because there's one truth. I just described that in a different way so
Yeah.
the left-brainers can get on board, because it's important to get those left-brainers on board. They're the ones that are kind of dragging their feet through this whole thing, and we need to give them something they can get a hold of.
And especially if they're the majority, too.
Yes, they're the majority, and not only are they the majority by numbers, but they're the massive majority by influence.
Yeah.
Can a virus or some other form of contamination enter or affect the larger consciousness system?
Okay, I would say that the larger consciousness system probably polices itself pretty well. I wouldn't say no, that's impossible. You know, I don't know the architecture of the larger consciousness system, but the larger consciousness system is unique when it comes to computing systems. It's unique because it writes its own operating system. It writes all of its own code. You see, you have a computer, a conscious computer, if you will, that is programming itself. Okay, so it's also, I imagine, policing itself. So if there's parts and ways of it, the way it interacts, that can get destructive, I suspect it has written the code to take care of that too. So I would say, no, I don't think that's a problem. But yes, it probably could exist. You know, there are probably ways that it works that maybe get out of hand. Certainly there are ways that it would work that could get useless. You could end up just with a lot of dead bits that aren't productive. Matter of fact, it's not that clear that this reality isn't one of those. You know, you could get into a thing that these bits just weren't working. They weren't helping the system evolve. In which case, just delete them. You know, erase the bits, use them for something else. So I suspect that it can take care of most of those things since it's in charge.
Hi, I had two questions. First, I was wondering, in quantum mechanics, when one half of an inverted pair is tweaked, its partner changes, even if on the other side of the universe, you had said?
Yeah, that's called
Yeah.
entanglement.
Yeah. What happened then to the speed of light as a limiting factor for transmission of
It doesn't
energy?
violate the speed of light because it doesn't work in the same way. No data is transmitted.
But
The quantum mechanics theory says that, okay, you have opposite sides of the universe, and what they'll do is they'll have two particles, one's a spin up, one's a spin down. Okay, and they're created that way and they're entangled that way. And that's because they had a spin momentum that was zero. But the particles that are created both have spin. And the only way to keep the spin zero is that one's up and one's down. Now it still has a total spin momentum of zero, you see, because it's opposite directions, which is what it started with. It's what it has to come out with. That's a conservation law. So now these two are like this, and they have to be that way because they were created by something that had zero spin, angular momentum. So now these things can move off to different places. You flip this one, it goes like this. And it doesn't matter if they're on opposite sides of the universe. If they're 100 million light years apart, it makes no difference. You flip this one, you get that one. And that's because there's no message being transferred. This one doesn't flip and send a message to that one. Hey, over there, I flipped, you got to go too. The message would have to translate that 100 million light years, or something. It's not like that. They're just an entangled pair. No message is ever sent. They're entangled quantum mechanically, and when one changes, the other one changes. Fact of life is conservation law. It's the rule set, you see. So if you think about a computer, what is it? It's an if-then statement. It's an if-then statement. If this one flips, that one flips. No communication necessary.
You don't think information is transferred?
No information is transferred. The information is inherent in the particles. The particles are really one thing. They were the one thing that came in and split apart. They're still one thing. And when one flips, the other flips. They're just one thing manifesting in two parts.
But if they're very separated,
They're separate.
then is it an argument for no distance, actually?
Yeah, basically it means there's no distance.
Yeah.
Even though there's distance here, it's some of that weird quantum mechanics. That's just the way it works because it's a rule set. It's an if-then statement, and I had somebody else ask me that question, and they say, well, we could use those flips to send a message by having some kind of code. You could send a Morse code statement if you had a whole bunch of these things. I'm going to go flip, 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 and that's two dashes and two dots, right? So now I'm sending a message, and you're not really sending a message. No data is transferring. Remember when I put that slide up with the green blocks and said that was those were the delta V's in this reality? Well, that's what it means, that you cannot transfer data from cell to cell to cell continuously through this reality system any faster than C. And that's still true, as far as we know, pending recent research. That's still true. This doesn't send data from cell to cell to cell from this one to that one. It's because they're an entangled pair. They're both part of one thing. So they both instantaneously know, and doesn't require any data to be sent.
Okay.
Why can't you do Morse code with it?
You can do Morse code with it, and in that sense, you can make a message, right? Go faster than the speed of light, and that's fine, but you still haven't translated any data any faster than the speed of light. So the rule says you can't move data through the system faster than the speed of light. The fact that you can create a message from here to there in Morse code faster than the speed of light doesn't matter. You haven't broken Einstein's speed limit of C because you haven't moved data through the system faster than the speed of light. So yes, if you were clever enough to do Morse code with a bunch of entangled particles, you could actually get information from here to there, but you don't get it. It's instant. It teleports from here to there. It doesn't move through the system faster than C. The idea is there because it's there and then it's here. You believe in an objective reality. You think that it had to move. You think you had to travel to get between those two. In this case, there's no travel. It's like teleportation. The information just teleports. So it doesn't violate relativity because no information is actually moving through the system. It just teleports through the system without going, it teleports over it, around it, through it, whatever you say. It doesn't actually move distance.
I just had my second question on kind of highly evolved beings. So if you can evolve or de-evolve or maybe stay in stasis for a little period of time, then there must be beings, and I think you talked about this at lunch in April, beings that have successfully evolved quickly for a long period of time because they just haven't wanted to de-evolve. And they get to a point where they might be outside of our experiential reality, but they would still uphold the rule set in our reality because they evolved through those rules. Would that be the case?
See, our reality is just this virtual thing that you get into because it's a learning lab, because you want to grow up, because you get experience here, and experience lets you make choices. So if you get to the point where this particular school no longer has a lot to teach you, then you wouldn't come back here anymore. But that's almost impossible to do. Okay, you're here for a while and you learn, you grow through pain, you grow up. Once you get to a certain point, you come back because you need to help others. Then you go to a little higher point after that, you come back and you teach. And then there's always something to do here that helps you make choices, that's helpful to other people, that lets you express love, that helps you grow up. So it's hard to come to an end point where this reality frame has nothing for you. But if you could get to such a point, then you would find some other reality frame more to your liking. Then you wouldn't necessarily come. This is not the only virtual reality, on the block. There's other virtual realities, and you might go to one that was better suited if you kind of outgrew this one.
Have you become aware of beings like that have just
there are
shot
beings
outside?
that are. There are a lot of beings that have never been here. All the beings aren't necessarily come through this, this particular virtual reality. I've run into lots of beings that have never been in this virtual reality. They do other things, other ways. So this is not the one, and I have run into some beings that are exceptionally grown, and probably a very few who probably are grown to where they don't have to come here anymore, and most of them do anyway, because they want to help.
We have a rule set here, and say if you have some knowledge of operating off of another rule set, say in some other world.
Some other reality frame.
Some other reality. But those laws somehow supersede this reality set.
Well, each reality set's just different. Okay, so the reality sets are all independent. Each reality frame has its own time, its own clock, its own delta T that makes it go. They each have their own focus, their own structure. The physics is generally not the same every place. You go to different reality frames and physics is a little different. But mostly I've found that it's very similar. You know, it's a little different, but it's mostly similar. And the reason I think I found that is that there's probably not a whole lot of rule sets that end up in a stable configuration. So, you know, we're going to have this big digital bang, and we're going to produce this rule set. It's going to produce this virtual reality that evolves. Well, I think it takes just a very fine tweaking of your rule set to get something that produces a stable reality like this one. So I think most of the ones that are stable tend to be similar because there's too many variables. It's like it comes out of chaos theory. You know, if you make little changes in things, like some of our cosmological constants, if they were just changed a little bit in the 5th or 6th or 8th decimal place, this whole reality would never have taken place. You know, it's that sort of thing. Sometimes it's just real balanced. Everything is just on a fine balance. And if you tip that balance a little, the whole thing, you know, goes to hell in a handbasket. It doesn't work anymore. So it turns out that this reality is really a hard thing to evolve, and it takes very precise constants and amounts of energy and temperature and pressure to start with. You know, all those initial conditions have to be pretty precise. But there are some differences, but not big differences. So I think the rule set in most places is going to be kind of similar to this. Mostly I have not gone, I probably can say I've never really gone to where the rule set was drastically different. Different, yes, but not so drastically that it would somehow interfere or contradict or, you know, have a problem. So I don't think that's a problem, that one is going to like override another. We have our own rule set, and it's a good virtual reality, and others are also good virtual realities. So I don't see, there's no competition or conflict between them. They're all just, you know, it's like you have The Sims and you have World of Warcraft, right? They don't really conflict with each other. They're just different games. But they're all kind of similar. They all have hominids with 2 legs that walk around and do things. And, you know, what they do is entirely different. Their style. They're not trying to kill each other in The Sims, right? That's, you know, it's a different game. But they're kind of similar. They're based on the same thing.
Yeah, would you say that a rock or a plant has a kind of consciousness that requires that some form of reality be rendered to them?
Okay, I'll answer that kind of yes and no. Kind of consciousness sounds more promising to me if we don't just say consciousness. I'm defining consciousness here as something with a finite decision space. So that's kind of a limited definition of consciousness, perhaps, that the decision space has to be finite. You can't be conscious unless you have decisions that you can make. You have this and this and this, and you get to choose. You need free will for this consciousness, and you need to be able to choose. Rocks don't have a lot of decisions that they can choose. You know, they can't say, I'm going to roll here, here, and here. Where they roll has to do with the forces that act on them. So in that sense, a rock cannot be conscious. Okay? In that sense, a tree is not conscious either, because the tree doesn't have a lot of decisions that it can make. Well, maybe that's because we don't understand trees as well as we should. Maybe if we really understood the nature of a tree, we'd find that they did have decisions that they could make. Decisions that have to do with their own internal workings, you know, and things like that. They maybe do have some consciousness. So when you say kind of, yeah, maybe, you know, we don't know, because they don't have our kind of consciousness. That doesn't mean they necessarily, you know, a squirrel doesn't have our kind of consciousness either, but they can probably make decisions. So yeah, maybe, you know, you might find some kind of consciousness in plants. Probably be hard to find some in rocks, but what you can find in rocks is a rock has a place in the database as well, right? That rock is there, and that's a part of the database. Now, things that happen around that rock, let's say that rock is a big rock where there's a big meeting place at the crossroads in Mesopotamia where a whole lot of interesting things happened. Now, if you had a piece of that rock, you could probably hold that rock and you could go back and experience some of the things that that rock witnessed. But don't jump to the conclusion that that rock has consciousness and you're entering the rock's mind. What you're saying is you're going into a database. Your consciousness is going to a database and telling the database with an inquiry that says, I would like to see and experience some of the things that happened around this rock. Well, the database knows where this rock is because there it is. You just picked it up off the ground, and it goes, gets the data, and it floods the data into your consciousness. And you go, wow, all this, yeah, I can see, you know, armies going by, all this stuff. And you can experience some of the experiences of the rock, but it doesn't mean the rock was conscious or has a mind or has a memory or anything else. You're not really getting it out of the rock. You're getting that data, what do they call it, psychometrics, right? When you touch something, some object, and you get data from it. You're not really getting data from the object. The object doesn't hold the data. The databases, the past actualized database holds the data. You're using the rock as a tool for focusing on asking data about things associated with that rock. Okay, here's an old piece of jewelry. I'd like to know the kind of the people who wore it, right? So you're asking the database. Come into the database, in the history database, and show me some pictures of the people who wore this jewelry. It's coming out of the database, it's not coming out of the jewelry. But we tend to confuse that because it's like we talk to the jewelry and the jewelry answers us, so we think the jewelry has a consciousness. So that's what, so now the rocks can have information associated with them, but that's different than being conscious. So yes, rocks can hold that. So now you can take a lot of rocks that were from a very, say, spiritual place perhaps, and then build your house out of them, and then you get this nice kind of glowy house that feels good because there's a lot of spiritual energy around those rocks. Well, that's because the data associated with those rocks is very nice data. And in as much as you're around those rocks and you're aware of them, you get a little bit of that with them. Again, it's not because the rock comes with magic essence or energy or vibrations. The rock's not vibrating with good energy. It's there associated with good energy. And that association is all captured in the databases, and you can share that association. So when you say kinda, there are associations like that.
I just had one other question. I struggle a bit with the idea that perceiving certain things like, say, auras is a metaphor. Mm-hmm. If it's a perceptual experience that someone has that is the same as, say, the perceptual experience of perceiving somebody's physical body, mm-hmm. Are you then saying that the physical body is just as much a metaphor as seeing an aura?
The physical body is just the data. Exactly. It isn't any difference. You see a physical body, all you're doing is getting data and interpreting it. When you see an aura, all you're doing is getting data and interpreting it. Absolutely no difference. When you're seeing this, this bench and that table and that blackboard, you're just getting data and interpreting it. None of it exists. Okay, now you've learned to interpret that table as a table because it's a flat surface, got 4 legs, things are sitting on it. So that's in your experience base as a table. And you can learn to interpret auras in the same way. You can read a book by Ledbetter called Man, Visible and Invisible, and he'll have all kinds of colored pictures, and he'll say, here's a picture of somebody's angry, here's a picture of somebody in love, and you can look at all these things and you can see all the metaphors that he's using to interpret the data. And then you can basically, your intent says, I'm going to see an aura. Oh yeah, I see it, that guy's angry. Oh yeah, there's those red zigzaggy lines, just like Ledbetter had. Well, you're basically using his format, his output format for your own. You're saying, all right, angry's red zigzaggy lines. So now that's what you get too. That doesn't mean that is an objective thing, that all anger has to be that way. It just means that's how you interpret it, and you interpret it because he interpreted it that way. Who knows why he interpreted it? Maybe somebody gave him some pictures too, or described them to them. Or maybe he just saw that and that's how he interpreted them. It's just the interpretation. You don't have to interpret them that way. You can have your own data output and interpret it any way you want. It's your query, and you can tell how you want the data back. But a lot of times people will see the same thing because they all kind of read the same books and get the same source. They share data, and some of it makes sense. An interesting thing about the auras and things like that, we have this shared, we're all connected, so we share things. The fact that a whole bunch of people see anger as red zigzaggy lines makes it more probable that I will see anger as red zigzaggy lines, particularly if I'm in and around those people, or if I'm aware of them. You see, some stuff, it's the 100 monkey thing that we share information. That's why a mob is more violent and unruly and stupid than any of the people in it. You see, together they start feeding each other's fear and each other's ego. That's why when you hang out in a place full of very enlightened and lovely people, you feel better, you feel light, you feel freer. Okay? You pick up that through association. We have metaphors like, I'm getting their, it's their vibration, I'm getting your vibe, and that's what. Well, these are just metaphors. They don't mean anything. Nobody's vibrating. You know, it's just the way we explain it. It's another metaphor. But what about cartoons? When you see a cartoon, a lot of things have to be implied with images. Okay, if you see a cartoon and you see circles around the top of their head and a bunch of little red stars, you know exactly what that means, don't you? Everybody knows what that means. Nobody had to learn that in school, you know, what that symbol meant. It's intuitive. You take that to a different culture. Take that to somebody who's never seen a cartoon before and say, what's going on with this character? And they say, oh, they just got hit in the head, they're dizzy. You know, it's kind of a universal metaphor, if you like. Why? Because that's often the way you see things in auras. In auras, you see things the same way. Now, everybody gets that information from auras, but most people don't get it up at an intellectual level where they can actually interpret it as a shape or see it. Doesn't mean you don't get it. Lots of people get that. I mean, you meet people and you instantly like them, you instantly dislike them. You're sharing this information about them all the time, and they're sharing information about you. So the data is available, but you have to practice a little to get it up at the intellectual level where you can turn it into a picture as a metaphor. It just takes a little more practice, but it's not something different than, you know, everybody gets that sort of thing. But some of the symbology seems to be, you know, and who was it? Jung, I guess. He talked about archetypes. He talked about symbols and metaphors that were common to cultures and common across all humanity. And these symbols show up often as we interpret auras and things like that. It's the same common symbols, common metaphors, and that's why we can share them with other people and other cultures, because we're all using the same metaphor. Where did we get it from? Well, it kind of gets passed around. You know, we all share it. It makes sense to us. So a lot of the cartoon imagery that you get for dizziness, for you know, for pain, for other things, are symbols that we also see in auras. We see similar kind of symbols in auras. If you look at somebody's aura, when they get over the head, you'll see stars. You'll see things going around like that. You know, it's a common metaphor. That's all.
Is this model being picked up, your model that we're just learning about now, is it being picked up by universities and schools?
No, I wouldn't say it's being picked up. I think it's way too early for that. It's just being found out about, mostly. Now, I've had a lot of students. I've had actually a fair number of physics graduate students get real interested in it, and they think it's terrific and all like that, but I don't know when you define being picked up. That's probably when somebody starts making official comments about it, and it's really hard to do that in an academic situation. So, no.
So what do you think's holding that back?
Oh, it's just the inertia of the culture. I mean, we have, through all the physics departments of the world, you have this tremendous reluctance to let go of Newtonian objective reality. And it's not just that they're being hard-headed or that they're being in denial. It's that they don't know what else to do. You know, it's like Einstein worked at it for 25, 30 years, and he came up with a big goose egg. What do you do with that? You can't work in a university for 25 or 30 years and not publish anything and not get fired. See, that's not on your career path to success. So we had all these brilliant people. You had Born, you had Heisenberg, you had Einstein. They're all writing these papers and say, what we need to do is find a new paradigm. Because without a new paradigm, it's like it's an interesting fact, but you don't know what to do with it. You can't operate on it. You can't derive things from it because you don't have a model. You don't have a theory that makes sense of it. So that's their problem. They don't know what to do with it. And when they don't know what to do with it, they start saying things like, nobody can understand it. It's impossible. You see, that gets them off a hook of being responsible for figuring it out. So it's just this inertia. We've gotten to the point that it's too hard to do. And in the beginning, it was really too hard to do because concepts of digital simulation, back at Einstein's time in the 1920s, digital simulation wasn't on the map. It wasn't a concept that they could deal with. It was not in their reality frame. So they couldn't reach out and go, aha, that's it, you know. This is a virtual reality. Virtual reality were words that didn't make any sense. They were nonsense back in the 1920s. So now that we have gradually, over the last, 3 or 4 decades, virtual reality is like, oh yeah, I understand that. And suddenly these concepts are starting to become available. You know, they're starting to become things that people can think about because they're now here. So that's just new now. 30 or 40 years is nothing in the history of, concepts of reality within a culture. That takes a long time to turn over. But it's growing. The good news is that you have people like Fredkin and you have people like Whitworth and the rest of them, and they're publishing papers and they're publishing in referee journals and science journals, and they're saying virtual reality is the way to go. It's better physics. And if they can come up with a good model, then other physicists will jump on that bandwagon and it'll go. Well, this is a good model. This model to them would have one big downside, and that's that it also explains metaphysics, the paranormal, and all kinds of other things that for the last, 80 years they've denied its existence. And you look kind of foolish if you deny something for 80 years and then turn around and say, oh yeah, I knew it was like that all the time. So it's a little hard. There's a lot of inertia going in one direction, and turning it around it's like turning around a freight train. It's going to take a little while to do it, but I'm hopeful. I think this theory will probably gain credibility at sometime in the future. The reason I believe that is that it answers the mail. It explains the unexplainable. There's all kinds of unexplainable scientific experiments out there, the double slit just being one of them. Pear Labs has a whole bunch of things. So does Frontier Science out of Tulane University. They have a whole bunch of things. There's been a fair number of researchers, besides the parapsychologists like at Duke University. They had a big parapsychology department for a long time. There's lots of people who have done research on things that are strange because they're interested. They want to know if it's real. And they'll do the research, and the research will say, yeah, it's real. And now they say, okay, now what? What do I do with this information? Where does this take me? What can I publish? Where does it take my career? And basically, it goes away after a while because there's a dead end, because there's no theory that they can grab hold of and say, yes, this explains it. See how this ties everything together? It's just like it's this weird fact that's out there, like the double slit, and you ignore it because there's nothing you can do with it. This actually gives them something they can do with it. They can take virtual reality and they can understand why these mysteries work. Suddenly it solved a whole bunch of problems. And geez, you end up with theology too. That's impossible. How does science give you theology? It's unthought of, unheard of. So it's going to take a while. This is a very big step. As far as paradigm changes go, we talk about a paradigm shift. Well, this is going to be like a paradigm earthquake. You think of the paradigm shifts from flat Earth all the way up to where we are today. That's going to be a bump in the road compared to this paradigm shift. If they get to this paradigm shift that I'm talking about, it's going to be a major, gut-wrenching, culture-twisting, mind-bending shift, and it isn't going to happen fast. Something that big is going to happen slowly, and it's going to take a long time because it's going to have to build very, very slowly. But at least it's a start. And I find one of the good things about it is I find young people relate to it real easily, because young people have been doing virtual reality basically since they were 8 years old. And the concept of virtual reality being, this being a virtual reality doesn't shock them at all. They go, oh, cool, good idea. Yeah, they like that. It's not like, that's crazy, which is what you get from an older generation that sees virtual reality as just a computer game. They can't imagine it like this. But you see, it does explain a lot of things. So anything that explains all the data, eventually, I think is going to win out. Same with evolution. When Darwin first published evolution, they made parodies of him. They had pictures of him as a monkey, a monkey body with his head on it, and it was a big joke. We evolved from monkeys. And Darwin was a monkey, and everybody laughed. But it explains the data. There's so much data that it explains that eventually science says, yeah, it's hard to refute something that explains all the data. I think this will eventually be like that too, but whether it takes 100 years or not, I don't know, how long it'll take. I think it'll go faster everything moves faster now than it did before. I'm hoping that within decades we might see some significant push into the universities and other things where people start taking this seriously. But my thought was, I came to the conclusion that it's a bottoms-up kind of thing. It's not the right idea to start at the top, which means start with the university professors and the guys who are doing research in consciousness. It's not a good idea to start there and try to convince them and then let that flow down. It's much better to start at the bottom, talk to you guys, other people, and let it bubble up for a couple of reasons. One, all the top guys doing things have big reputations and big careers on the line. If anything changes very much and they missed it, it doesn't look good. Secondly, they're very, very busy. Anybody that's at the top of their game gets, way more input than they want because everybody wants to show them their idea. So they don't have time for much other than what they're doing. And lastly, things that are imposed from the top down. When the top says, oh, this is a great idea, we should all move to this. Ideas imposed from the top down don't tend to last long and don't tend to have a very deep impact. They're easily ignored. Time goes by, years go by, and they go away because they were dependent on the people, the experts. When the experts go away, that goes away too. If it bubbles up from the bottom and you have a groundswell and you have a few 100,000 or a few million people who think, this is the way, this makes sense, this is good, then suddenly the experts have to pay attention. It doesn't matter how busy they are. They have to pay attention. They have to deal with it. And that's a lot harder to chase away. That will then grow and grow and grow and I think become something. So I believe the bottom up is the correct solution if you really want to make a long-term change in the way we see reality. It's got to start at the bottom and let the people drag the scientists kicking and screaming into the game. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. We'll see you tomorrow.